They gained control of the entire surface of the earth. So one of them said, "They are earthlings. We have finished with them. Next we will bring down the people of the sky." One of them actually threw his spear into the sky, and it returned covered in blood. Sahih al-Musnad 534. And Nawas ibn Salman radiyallahu anhu reported that the Messenger of Allah shallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "The Muslims will light a fire from the bows of Yaju and Maju and from their arrows, and from their shields for 7 years." Sahih al-Musnad 538. Explanation: these two hadiths are clear evidence that the weapons of Yaju and Maju were traditional and ancient weapons of war. The first hadith mentions spears, while the second hadith mentions arrows, bows, and shields. The second hadith clearly states that the Muslims will be able to keep the fire of the weapon of Yaju and Maju burning for 7 years, which clearly indicates that the weapon is made of wood. This characterization is only appropriate for describing ancient weapons. Conclusion: it is clear from all the hadiths presented above that the wars of the last days will be fought using ancient strategies and weaponry. That is why the ahadith mention horses, swords, spears, and short spears. These means of warfare cannot be interpreted in any other way, and cannot be transferred to today's means of warfare. The hadiths themselves also explain that the existing strategy of warfare also follows the traditional strategy of warfare, which is that there will be no victory if you attack at night. The troops were also organized in rows, facing directly at a certain distance from their enemy. Such a strategy is impossible to imagine unless the war equipment used in the war is ancient, traditional equipment. Another point that reinforces this conclusion is that the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, made it clear that horses will continue to be used for jihad until the Day of Judgment. This also confirms that we are now in a brief, exceptional era where horses are no longer used in battle, but they will again be a means of warfare that determines victory in future battles. B. Orientation of opinions on war strategy and its relationship to natural events. In light of what has been said earlier, the hadiths that speak of end-time battles all imply that the methods used will be ancient warfare strategies, and the equipment will be traditional. This information cannot be interpreted as some people have suggested. This leads us to a definitive conclusion: modern tools of war will inevitably perish and fall into disrepair. This is something that some people consider impossible, especially considering the fact that science and knowledge continue to develop rapidly. It is not easily accepted by reason and logic to imagine the return of civilization back to the state of ancient times, especially in terms of science and technology. That is why some people deliberately use the weapon of interpretation to understand these prophetic texts, even though, as I have said before, these texts contain something that prevents and invalidates their interpretation. The main indication that they rely on in their interpretation is what they consider to be an axiom, namely, that the rapid development of the current era is not easily erased from human memory. Others take the view that the meanings of the texts are to be taken literally. However, at the same time, there are indications that there is still a distance of many centuries and many generations between us and this massive battle. What pushes them towards this understanding is the aforementioned axiom, which is that it is not easy for them to imagine the eradication of all these times and technological advancements so easily, even if it takes centuries to happen. As for those who think that a return to ancient times is imminent, they attribute this to human causes, perhaps imagining that World War III will destroy everything, including all modern weaponry. Based on the specificity of the issue, what is correct, in my opinion, is that the war strategy of the Great Battle was an ancient war strategy. The ancient warfare equipment described by the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, who was blessed with Yuwami al-Kalam, concise but insightful words, and who was able to see what would definitely happen until the Day of Judgment through Rabbani. Revelation is considered the biggest indication to corroborate what I have described. There will be an extraordinary natural event that will affect the earth, affecting all its systems, or laws that have been full of the progress of today's civilization, supported by the power of modern technology. It is well known that the slightest disturbance in the Earth's atmospheric layer will definitely affect the telecommunication system, and also the flight navigation system, and so on. These are the laws of nature that have been studied by humans, and with their efforts can be benefited from the measurable provisions, can be calculated with mathematical formulas or calculations of our time. This is the era of countless new discoveries. Although sometimes among these new discoveries something excess is produced that has a powerful influence that is destructive, so that it can change the face of the world as a whole. If these destructive inventions were to coincide with an adverse natural event, it is certain that their collaboration would be capable of shaking and changing the face of the world. That is when catastrophic famines, epidemics, and social upheavals occur. In such a situation, civilization and all its components will be totally lost. At that point, it becomes easy for us to imagine the drivers and causes that return war to its original state. What some people see as requiring a background is sometimes not required in the early stages of affairs. Until the moment that inevitably changes everything that we go through, hence events that occur without a natural cause are not impossible at any time, as specialists see it. What I am saying is not imaginary, but the collapse of modern technology and civilization is not something that has not crossed the imagination of most scientists today. In fact, it is more common in their imagination than it is in ours. Anyone who studies the intricate and highly complex systems that govern the globe, and the interrelationships of some of them with others, to the extent that an event that some people consider simple, and that occurs in a very isolated location, may have a tremendous effect on many systems on our globe. Such things as the study of the Earth's spherical system and the excellent descriptions of it by scientists make it easier to accept the terrible events that will occur and the damage they will cause. In order to make this matter clearer, we say that the global phenomenon that is occurring in our time, called the greenhouse effect phenomenon because of global warming, is considered by many specialist experts, geographers, and climatologists to have a destructive influence and impact that is capable of ending the life of modern civilization quickly and thoroughly. They link the rise in the Earth's temperature to the occurrence of devastating hurricanes, deadly disease outbreaks, famine, and drought, devastating wars over natural resources and energy, environmental changes, climate change, the sinking of many cities, and even the total submergence of a country underwater due to tsunamis, sea level rise, or land subsidence, as well as the breakdown of many natural laws that govern the Earth's sphere. Ordinary people like us may find it difficult to make the connection between what I have just mentioned and the phenomenon of global warming. But experts who specialize in that field, based on their understanding of how much natural phenomena and climate are connected and related, are able to come up with a clear explanation for their entire description of this. If this is the description and conception of future experts towards a simple phenomenon, such as the phenomenon of rising Earth temperature, then what about their description and concept if there is a giant meteor whose impact power is equivalent to 100,000 times the power of a nuclear bomb crashing into the Earth? Such an event, such as a cataclysmic natural event, and its aftermath, is difficult for a human being with complete insight to imagine. The suggestion that such a natural event could bring an end to all forms of modern civilization can be considered the easiest and closest to reality in the imaginations of experts in the field. So ask the people of knowledge if you do not know. And Null 45. Conclusion. The hadiths of the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, about future battles, clearly show that the strategies and equipment used at that time were ancient. This is one of the evidences that shows that this modern civilization, in all its forms, will definitely be destroyed. This is a strong indication that a major abnormal event will befall our globe. This event will affect the Earth globally. There is no indication that this destruction of modern civilization is the result of a simple or ordinary event, such as an earthquake, volcanic eruption, and the like, nor is it caused by a massive war. This major event will stifle all scientific and technological capabilities, but it will not lead to its total destruction. This is the result of observations after 2 world wars. 2. The attribution of Lassa alayhi salam to the character of the period of his descent as contained in the Gospel. This indication is the only one in my book as a whole, in which I have mentioned a number of Israelite reports, although throughout my study, which I claim to be a study of all the books of the previous religions, especially of everything related to predicting the future, I found only in the Quran and al-Hadith something that could heal the gaps in understanding the various components of the fitna, the battle and the signs of the last days. So I felt that these 2 Islamic references were enough to fill my book. This is the original rule, because they are the original sources that we must rely on. As for other sources of reference, especially the previous religious books, we know for certain that they have been altered and changed. Therefore, we will not be safe from error and misguidance if we take reference from the books of the previous religions. This is why I have chosen to leave the majority of the data or testimonies from these books, including those that are in accordance with our Sharia. However, in this chapter, in view of the ambiguity and the connection with the period of the Dajjal and the descent of Isa peace be upon him, I feel it necessary to mention some of the texts in the Injil that describe the nature of this era. I mention them here only as indications, to supplement the data for discussion, not as proof or testimony, especially when the reports in these earlier scriptures do not contradict what is indicated by the proofs in our Sharia. This method of narrating Israelite is permissible and falls within the scope of what the Prophet peace and blessings of Allah be upon him said. You narrate from the children of Israel. There is nothing wrong with that. It is stated in the Injil that Jesus alayhi salam told his Hawari about the time of his descent, and they asked to be told the signs that would indicate it. The following texts indicate this. His disciples came to him when he was alone, and they said, "Tell us, when is this the descent of Isa, and what are the signs of your coming and the end of the world?" Jesus answered, and said to them, "Take heed that no one misleads you. Verily many will come in my name, saying, Al-Masih. They mislead many, and you will hear of wars and news of wars. There will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in many places. But all this is only the beginning of the sickness. It is then that they hand you over to hardship, and they fight you. You became hated by all the people because of my name. At that time many people slipped. Some of them reconciled with others, but some hated others. False prophets and liars appeared in great numbers, and led many astray. So whenever you saw the terrible collapse spoken of by the prophet Daniel, who stood upright in the holy place for the reader to understand, then at that time those who were in the region of Judaism ran towards the mountain. They prayed that your escape would not take place in winter, and not on a Saturday. For at that time there was a great distress, such as has never happened since the beginning of nature until now, and it will never happen like that again. If those days had not been shortened, not a single body would have survived. But because of the elect, the days were shortened. For the time after the narrowness of that day, the sun and the moon were darkened, and did not give their light, and the stars fell from heaven. Then the sign of the Son of Man appeared. Gospel of Matthew, chapter 24. This first text in the Gospel of Matthew is repeated on the same theme in the Gospel of Mark and the Gospel of Luke, with some important differences, which I present below. And there were great earthquakes in various places, and famines, and pestilences. There were frightening circumstances, and great signs from heaven. Before this, they stretched out their hands to you, drove you away, and handed you over to crowds, prisons, and you were led before kings and governors. Signs appeared in the sun, moon, and stars. Trouble befalls the earth, the people are perplexed, the sea and the waves are roaring. The people were terrified, and waited to see what would happen to the inhabited areas. For the supports of the heavens shook violently. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 23. And whenever you see the evil of the collapse spoken of by the prophet Daniel, that takes place in an undeserved manner, you pray that your escape does not take place in winter. For it takes place in the narrow days of which there has been nothing like it since the beginning of the creation, created by Allah until now, and will never happen again. Had Rab not condensed those days, no body would have been saved. But for the sake of the chosen ones, whom Allah chose, He shortened those days. As for the days after the narrowness, the sun and moon were darkened, and did not give their light, and the stars of the sky fell. Gospel of Mark, chapter 13.